What's going on, everyone? Caliber Whips here, and today this is going to be a video on how to set up the Turks knots foundations that go on your whip, because that is a very paramount thing to do, in the sense that if you get a very bad foundation, you're going to have a very bad Turks knot. It may look good when you first make it, but over time that's going to wear down, and over time there's stress that's going to be applied to it. And I've had old whips look really bad because the transition, like for example, like my early whips, like the first 3 or 4 whips that I've made, had just electrical tape as the transition, literally just like a thick mound of electrical tape that I carved into the shape of a bulb, and then I just attached my heel knot over it. And over time that really wore down and I hated it, so I moved on to leather, and that's what I use now. So I'm going to show you guys how to set up a Turks knot at the heel and at the transition, both different styles. I use different leather for depending on what I need. So this is a stunt whip. It has a different transition from the heel. A 6-foot Classic 2.0 has the same transition at the heel knot and the transition. So I'm doing a stunt whip, so it varies. Now, as you guys can tell, what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to chop this off, because I'm going to start from the very beginning. What happens, at the start. So I glued up my strands, I plated it. So now, what I'm going to do is just literally wrap this up in artificial sinew. It's actually quite straightforward. Now keep in mind, you have to know how long you want everything to be. This is going to be a 10-inch handle, so I actually made an 11-inch rod, and then I measured 1 inch ahead of time. So that explains why I know what I'm doing right off the bat. But you guys want to make sure you pay very close attention to what's going on. Now you don't have to use artificial sinew. You can use hockey tape or nylon thread. I prefer to use artificial sinew because you don't need too much of it. Like probably one more pass and I'd probably be good to go. Because this is going to be covered by a thick piece of leather with a bunch of nails driven into it. I love this thing. A little torch. The only thing I hate about it is the fuel tank is so small, you have to refill it all the time. Now, what I'm going to do is get my trusty hacksaw, and I'm basically going to cut this whole thing off from where the sinew ends. So just right there, I'm going to saw it all the way down and just cut it off completely. So there we go, I just cut it off. Now what I like to do to make it cleaner, I take my little torch and I literally just torch up the sides. Actually, I scorch the whole thing. Take my finger. I don't know if you guys saw that, but you could see my saliva turn into steam because this was so hot. And no, I didn't hurt myself. When you're a whip maker, you pretty much develop asbestos fingers. Okay, now what I'm doing is there's bits of nylon that flares out at the sides. You can see that like right here especially. What I'm going to do is take my heavy-duty snippers and just snip it all the way around so it's flush with the handle. Now don't worry if you're cutting into your sinew, because that's what I'm doing right now. Just pull off gently and then torch it, because the sinew should be nylon. Alright, there we go. Now what I'm going to do is attach the leather. So the leather that I like to use is either 9 or 10 ounce vegetable tanned or chrome tanned cowhide. 9 to 10 ounces vegetable or chrome tanned cowhide. And that's what I use for thick knots. Now if I want them thinner, I use deer skin, but I'll show you that later in the video. I just went ahead and cut a strip. Now you're probably thinking, what thickness is it? That doesn't really matter. It depends on how big you want the knot to be. Literally, the thickness has no real value. I'm just showing you the thickness so you guys have a general idea if you guys want to copy it exactly. So one of the things that I like to do is kind of bevel on the leather. So what I do is I'll take this tool right here, Crafts Pro tool. It's got a little 3 right there. I think they're like 40-50 bucks for this. And I'll set it down against something, and I'll just whoop, along the whole edge. And let me show you what that looks like. Let me focus the camera. Okay, there we go. I'll just take it like that and then bevel the whole edge right off. So now when it lays on the whip, it's nice and circular. It doesn't make a sharp point. See that? So I just do this with both sides. There are some whip makers that go very, very extreme, and they'll like cut it down to like a very, very fine taper. You don't need to do that, but I would recommend at least investing in a beveler, because I've used this beveling tool for a long time now, and I really, really like it. And that's what I use for pretty much all my whips. Anyways, let's attach it to the heel knot, or the base of our whip. So the nails that we're using are wire brads, number 19 by 1/2 inch. I prefer using the brads, but what I'll do is I'll put in anywhere from 20 to 30 nails, and I'll take this and I'll snip off the heads. Snip it right into the trash can, so it looks like that when we're done. Then what I'll do is I'll take my pliers, I'll find the edge that we're going to do, kind of align it up flush with the top, just kind of press that in a little bit, just, you know, part of it like whoop, over half of it sticking out. So that's pretty much what we're doing. So line it flush with the whip, and then I like to nail them in, because when you nail them in, the top of it kind of gets flattened, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Because when you snip it, it creates like a sharp little jagged piece. I think you guys can see that just barely. And when you basically hammer it in, basically just kind of do it like that, and then hammer. And then what that'll do is flatten out that edge, and it'll make it nice and flush with the leather. And then I'll pretty much do that just like 2 or 3. Actually, I'll go anywhere from 3 to 5. I'll wrap this around, find out where that ends, take my knife, and then saw into that. Then I'm going to take my beveler. See that fluffy right there? I'm just going to take that and bevel that off, and there we go. It aligns nice and flat with the whip. So what I'm going to do now is just pretty much cut like 2 or 3 more, and I'll show you what I'm going to do next. I'll usually do this and then snip. There we go. Dropped one. Oh well, I'll find it with my feet later. So I'll take that and then hammer that in. Now you want to be careful because it might spring out if you're not careful, so I'm going to work a bit quickly. I don't think it'll spring out, but thicker pieces of leather are more likely to. Okay, so I think we're good here, so I'm just going to basically snip the heads off. Now, usually I don't do that. I snip them into the trash can, but I just wanted to show you what that looks like. You might want to cover your eyes when you do it. Now what you could do is I'm pretty much going to use up the rest of the nails on here because I'll pretty much scatter them all over the place because it can still move. As you can tell, I've already kind of loosened it up a bit. But it can still move, and that's a no-no. So I'm going to come back when I pretty much nail in all of the nails that we have here. So there we go. We have added all of the nails in the Turks knot. Now some people might think that's a little excessive, but do keep in mind it is better to be safe than sorry. Now what I'm going to do is put some black artificial sinew over it. Now you can put like you can put hockey tape on it. Avoid using electrical tape because even though electrical tape would actually be perfectly okay in this situation, you're only putting it on the Turks knot just a little bit. You're not putting gobs and gobs of it on the transition at the end of the whip. At the transition of the whip. So putting E-tape right here would be okay. Problem is, I would avoid it because if a customer asks, like if you're going to sell it, if you're keeping it for yourself, that's different. But if you're selling it and someone asks, is there electrical tape in here? And you say yes, but only in the transition knot or the Turks knot, it's still better to say no electrical tape is present in this whip. So just wanted to point that out. So just kind of wrap it all over, and when that's done, I'll show you what it looks like. So there we go, that's all there is to it. Just wrap it up in some artificial sinew. Now, some whip makers put like a little concho here or something. I still prefer using the little disc of parachute cord. It's pretty easy to make. All you do is just take a piece of parachute cord, just start spiraling it with your fingers, and every now and then put a little drop of super glue on it to keep it together. You might see a little bit of glistening right here where I put one drop of super glue, just in case if at one point it kind of spirals open, it doesn't ruin your work. So anyways, I just melted it up here just to kind of keep it saved. Now what I'm going to do is hold it at an angle like that, and I'll show you how to install this thing, or any concho really. So the thing that I like to glue the little spiral on, the glue that I like to use is this. It's contact cement. I actually really like using it. Now there is kind of a trick to using contact cement, because if you use it wrong it'll pretty much drive you crazy. But the way that I like to do this, just dab it on here. Might have a little too much. There we go. That's about good. I'm just gonna pretty much dab this contact cement on this, and I'm going to dab some on this. So see if I can get in camera so you guys can see what I'm doing in the background right here. There we go. Now this is contact cement. You have to have two surfaces and then they contact each other. Okay, now people who already know that, that's nothing new to them, but there's always someone out there who didn't know that. So there we go. Again, this is the brand that I like to use. Now obviously if you were attaching a metal concho, you would want to, like Nick Schrader, what he would do is drill a hole into the actual steel rod and basically like screw it on. And if he wants to do that, that is completely fine. I would recommend doing that with a metal concho. But if you're doing like a little paracord concho, this method works pretty good too. So I would let this dry for about 15 minutes, because if I put it on now, it would just slip and slide everywhere and it wouldn't dry. So the way this works is that you put the contact cement, you contact both surfaces with the cement, and then you just let it sit there for about 15 minutes, no more than 2 hours. But I'll come back in about 15 minutes, and it'll look like there's almost no glue on it. So I'll show you I'll try not to move the camera, so when I get back with you, it'll look almost like it hasn't been glued at all. So as you can tell, it looks a little glossy. It's been about 15 minutes. I'd say around 13 to 12. But now, this is, again, contact cement. This stuff does not affect me if I touch it with my fingers. Okay? I mean, look. Absolutely nothing at all. But if I put it together, for example, I'm going to touch the edges, just barely. It sticks. So what I'm going to do is just align it perfectly, because you only get one shot. If you mess it up, you pretty much have to do the whole thing again. In the sense that you have to make a new disc, you have to re-glue it, but this foundation is still the same. So I'm going to stand up and look very closely at it, so about right there. Perfect. And then I'm just going to press that really hard. Get your little rolling thing or hammer. You can tap it if you want. If there's, for example, you can see a little bump right here, take your lighter, just nuke it. There we go. Now the only thing left to do is attach a knot. But I'm actually not going to do that. You guys have already seen the close-up photos of the stunt whip. So what I'm actually going to do now is transition to the transition. So I'm going to show you guys what type of leather I use for doing this type of transition knot. So the leather that I use is 2-ounce deer skin. Very soft, has that nice leathery smell to it. I like it a lot. Pretty much what a couch store smells like that has real leather. So what I've done is I've taken a piece that's about 4 inches long and 1/2 inch wide, and I'm pretty much going to do this. Now do keep in mind this stuff is notorious for flaking everywhere. See those little flakes, those little granules? You're going to want to blow all that stuff off. So I'm going to find pretty much where the diamond ends and the herringbone begins. I have to be careful because if I, stick it right there and then it actually begins, up here, that's not good at all. So I'm going to find like the max point, which is pretty much the bottom. So for example, this is the bottom. This is the max point that we have, so I'm going to put it about right there, roughly. And I'm going to observe it all the way up. That's good. That is very good. So I'm going to get my nails and I'm going to just basically probably get like 5 or 6 of them this time. And get my snippers. So I'm just basically going to cut the heads off a couple. Okay, there we go. So, I've got my pliers here. Probably would be a good idea now that I'm looking at it, because this is at an angle. I'm just going to cut that flat. There we go. Just to make it a bit better. I just dropped another nail. I think that's one that I cut. Yep, it is. Okay, there we go. Just dropped another nail. I hate this. It drives me crazy. Okay, there we go. Find the end of it, just like that. Perfect. I'm going to do it again. Now you have to be careful because since this leather is so thin, you don't need to bevel the edges. That's probably what some of you guys were thinking. Do you have to bevel the edges? The answer is no. Now you do want to be careful because since this stuff is so thin, you could actually just pull it right off. Now what I'm going to do here is bring this around, pretty much find where the leather ends and where the other piece begins, so I'm just going to cut it. No need to explain too much here. There we go, that's about good. Just going to cut some more nails. Might have to edit some of this so it's not unbearably long. Okay, we got the other nail here. Now what I'm going to do is kind of look through and kind of align it, because it's kind of slanted, as you guys can see. So I'm just going to look through, just slant certain parts back to normal. That's about good. And I'm probably going to do like 3 more nails along here. I don't need too many this time, because we're not going to be putting our weight on this transition knot. It's the heel knot that needs all of the steel nails. So let me get my, there we go, the steel nails that were here. I'm going to align them up like this. And then snip them off. By the way, none of those heads went in the trash can. They all shot over there, which stinks, but you know. I accidentally bent a nail, so what I'm going to do here is just kind of reshape it. There we go. So what I'm going to do is put some black artificial sinew on this, and then we'll be done. So there we go, the transition knot foundation is complete. The heel knot foundation is complete. The only thing left to do is to attach the Turks knots. Now if you guys are curious to see what they look like when it's complete, check out my video, the Caliber Whip Showcase, where I showcase the Stunt Whip and the 6-Foot Classic 2.0. So go check that out. I'll put a link in the description for that video, as well as a link for my website. But that is pretty much it. If you guys want to know how to tie these knots, Nick Schrader from Nick's Whip Shop has a video on how to do this knot. And the 14 by 12 pineapple knot, there is no video on that. I said if my stock whip video gets 2,000 likes, I'd come out with a video on that, so it's just a matter of time. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.